Welcome to SchezzWho, your top spot for politics. And my role in bringing you great political content requires your role in consuming it. So, like this video, comment on this video, share this video around with your friends, and most importantly, subscribe to the SchezzWho channel. Growth is important here. Viewers like you bring that growth. So, please subscribe, like, and comment, and do all that jazz. Now, for the individuals and groups that help this channel along, starting with the Dissent Agenda. It's a brand new show based out of Virginia Beach, hosted by Melissa Lucasen and Cody Connor, who, by the way, their StreamYard is what I'm allowed to do this show on. So I definitely hope that you support their show as well over at the Dissent Agenda on YouTube. For insurance purposes in Hampton Roads, hit up Mr. Farley Perkins, 757-271-6655. He can help you with all your local insurance needs. Let's say it's around this time of night, you're feeling hungry and you want some nice southern food, then you have to head on over to Ellen's Homestyle and Barbecue Express, which has a location here in Portsmouth on Portsmouth Boulevard, but also across from Regent University in Virginia Beach. So look for Ellen's Homestyle and Barbecue Express for some great food. And if you want to finish off with a nice sweet treat or confection, then I would suggest head on over to ELG Sweet Boutique in Portsmouth, right there on High Street. Now, if you need help with some personal money issues like credit fixes, lending private money, or debt consolidation, I suggest Mr. Seiko Varner, Positive Vibes Incorporated, 757-932-0177. To reach him. He's also a great DJ if you need help in the DJ entertainment type situation. And he also created the Hampton Roads Grade Book, a fantastic application to help you find Black-owned businesses in the 757. And also support the Black Swan podcast, The Mindset. It's on Spotify. It's hosted and operated by my wonderful, awesome, lovely wife, Andrea Dixon Chesvener. So again, hit up the Black Swan podcast to learn some great new stuff. So I live in Portsmouth. I have for a few years now. And tonight's show will highlight Portsmouth and the race for Portsmouth Commonwealth Attorney. The current Commonwealth's attorney for Portsmouth is Stephanie Morales. She's SchezzWho's guest tonight. And who is Stephanie Morales? Well, she's been a Portsmouth Commonwealth attorney since 2015. She was the first woman elected to the role. She's a lifelong Portsmouth resident and attended IC Norcom High School. She received her BA at Norfolk State University. Behold the green and gold. Definitely going to shout that out multiple times. My wife would there as well. So behold the green and gold. She received her JD from William and Mary. She's a mother of 4 who is raising them in the very same community she grew up in, right here in Portsmouth, Virginia. So I'm going to have her on right now. Welcome her on to the show, the Honorable Stephanie Morales. First question of the night. How are you feeling tonight?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm doing pretty well. I did a little bit of a chess lesson in Virginia Beach, right back here in time to do this show. I'm feeling good. I'm glad you're feeling good. Let's have some fun with this. So campaigning, roughly the last week or so. Could you tell me a little bit about that? What's it like on your neck of the woods?
So it's very similar to what my normal life is like. It's a lot of engagement with the community. And I am, as you said, a daughter of Portsmouth. So it is not anything that feels unusual for me. This past week, I spent a lot of time at community events. Whatever you saw that was going on in the city of Portsmouth, I was most likely there. Again, a very common thing for me. And I spent a lot of time over the weekends with our church community as well. So just spending time with our community members, doing what I always do. Yes, we're talking about the campaign. Yes, we are making sure that people know about voter engagement and early voting, but just spending time with the community. So it felt good.
That's definitely the best way to do it, is to get out there and meet as many people as possible. I'm curious. This is one of the first times I get to interview a Commonwealth's attorney. So let's start right from the concept of the law. Why study the law? What interested you in that, and what drove you to pursuing it?
So I have a children's book called The Day I Became a Lawyer that actually talks about my path to wanting to become an attorney. And I decided that I wanted a career in the law when I was very young. I was probably about 6 years old. And it was because my mom took me to visit the courthouse, and I instantly just fell in love with all of the talking and the noise and the action that was going on in the courtroom. But as I got a little bit older, I started to really consider the concept of fairness and thought about justice and how I could be a part of making sure that we have people and system actors in our criminal justice system who are committed to fairness. And I've always had a heart for public service. So I found my way to the Commonwealth Attorney's Office actually when I was in law school, and I interned there every year while I was in law school at William and Mary. So I started out really wanting to go into a career in the law early on, but I made my way to the criminal justice arena just naturally throughout the course of my studies. And now I'm leading the office where I once interned and have been in this office. I've been serving for over 10 years, but I've been in this office for going on 15.
So very, very good experience. Good to hear that. Good to hear that. And also noting that you grew up in Portsmouth, went to Norfolk State, went to William and Mary. So you stayed in the 757 for all of this.
Yes.
And back in Portsmouth now. I'm curious if you could let us know what are your favorite Portsmouth things, say favorite businesses, favorite groups to hang out with, to do anything recreation-wise in Portsmouth. What are your favorite things?
So I think this is really cool. If you were to ride around the city right now and look at all of the businesses, the restaurants, the establishments, you would see my signs. Because a lot of the business owners and the people who I frequent their establishments, I know them. I spend time getting to know them and I support them regularly. So a lot of them, you can ride up and down the city and see where you see my yard sign. That's where a lot of those businesses and establishments are. But one of the activities I really love is I like dancing, and I like anything where we have positive vibes and good energy. So yesterday, again, one of those community events that I was at, we had a line dance festival, and a lot of the members of our community who were there, they're just very positive people who want to have a good time, but also care about the wellness and the well-being of our community. So that's the quick way to go about it. But I'm just anywhere that the good vibes are and supporting fine establishments and good people in our city.
Line dancing. Been years since I've been dancing, so cool to see that they still have line dancing. I would suggest West Coast swing, but that's a little bit of myself. Back to the law. For the sake of the viewer, break down the role of a Commonwealth attorney. I've had on delegate candidates, school board candidates, commissioner of the revenue candidates. I've even had on congressional candidates. But what makes the CA role unique to politics?
So the Commonwealth's attorney is frequently referred to as the district attorney in other areas around the country, the state's attorney, or if you're in the District of Columbia, the attorney general. But it is the chief prosecutor for any city, responsible for the administration of justice when it comes to criminal matters. And so we handle in my office anything from simple assault when it comes to juvenile and domestic relations, all the way up to murder cases. So whenever there is a harm that has been done and it rises to the level of a criminal offense, my office is involved. And as the elected prosecutor, I'm responsible for all of the prosecutors in the office, the administrative professionals, and also our victim witness department. So that is the technical responsibility. But for me, I believe in doing a little bit more. And that's why I've established sustainable programming that we've had in place for over the past 10 years to make sure that we're not just reactive and that our job is not only in the courtroom, but that we're taking a part and also ensuring that we try to do everything that we can to reduce crime and keep people on the right track.
Good to hear. Good to hear. And please forgive me if you hear a random crash or a meow because two cats just walked into the room. Who knows what could happen when that happens. I like to study for the shows and guests that I have on. And in looking over the several candidates running, including yourself, I looked at priorities. Two of them have preached the word integrity and restoring trust in the system. And I think they are saying that is to give the impression that the system in Portsmouth right now is not trustworthy or that it lacks integrity. So where might they be wrong on that?
Well, it really depends on what your priorities are. And so I've always been very clear with my community that My priority is establishing a system where we are fair and just, and that we're protecting marginalized communities, and that we're not just having accountability for the members of the community, but that system actors are held accountable, and that we are looking at the values and not just locking people away and leaving it at that. And so, what the system has frequently done is it locks people up and expects for crime to disappear. But research has shown that we can simultaneously become over incarcerated and less safe. And so, whenever you hear people talking about integrity, they have to explain what that means to them. But for me, integrity means sticking to the values that I've always discussed with this community, which is that we are committed to fighting against violent crime, but we are committed to also fairness and ensuring that we are not harming communities that have been harmed by this system. And when we talk about trust in the system, that trust has to be earned. There have been communities that have never trusted this system nor this profession, because this profession and this system have done a lot of harm, especially to communities of color and marginalized communities. So I don't know who does or does not trust the system as it was before I came into office. But I do know that there are several and many, many members of my community who trust this system a lot more now that I have talked about the harms that this profession and this system has done, and being a part of the solution to ensure that this system and my profession are not continuously harming marginalized communities.
I hear that. I hear that very well. Conversely, one of your priorities is building an effective and fair system that brings accountability to all in the community. So, to the layperson, what does that mean? What does accountability mean? What does fairness mean? And what does it look like?
Yeah, so let me I'll trail that right on to the end of what I was saying. When you talk about accountability, the community is already accustomed to members of the community being held accountable. So if someone in the community, a regular person, just like me or anyone in my family, if we go out and we run a red light, we are accustomed to getting a ticket and going to court and dealing with that. And it goes so on and so forth as you get more serious with the crimes. People in the community are very aware that when someone from the community does something, they are held accountable in the criminal sphere. What people are not used to seeing is system actors holding themselves and other system actors accountable. So, for example, I have been very clear about my commitment to police accountability. When members of our community are harmed by law enforcement, I have held police accountable, and I have a record for that. That is something that communities, not just in Portsmouth, but all around the country, do not have trust in the system when it comes to police accountability, because they have not seen many examples of prosecutors holding law enforcement accountable. Or, for example, we have issues around the Confederate monument. And there are, members of the community who want to express themselves and they want to exercise their First Amendment rights. We've seen instances around the country where protesters who were peaceful were held criminally responsible and they were not allowed to exercise their First Amendment rights. And I stood up and protected that right when there was no crime being committed, or there was no lack of peacefulness. Our community members should be entitled to express themselves in that way without fear of prosecution. And so when I speak about accountability, I mean, yes, we will continue to hold people accountable who are violent and who cause problems to the safety for our community. But also I'm committed to holding system actors accountable, and I hold myself accountable to ensure that it's not just, justice or safety for one group or accountability for one group, but not accountability when it comes to protecting the community from system actors. So my commitment is a little bit more developed. I talk about more things than just law and order or what sounds good. I like to get into what my values are, because when you elect a Commonwealth attorney or anyone to any position, you should know what their value system is, and they should be willing to speak on it. And I've always been willing to speak on it and then stand on what I have committed to doing.
Sounds fair. And also noting here that I could tell that you're nonetheless quite strident in going against violent crime. It may seem like a misnomer that progressive CAs aren't tough on crime. What are your thoughts on that?
So when I first ran for office and got elected in 2015, over 10 years ago, there was no talk about progressive prosecutors. And so that terminology came along a little bit later. And with it, people started labeling, different people, different prosecutors, and thought that there was one size fits all. I have always been committed to addressing violent crime appropriately and being very strict when it comes to keeping our community safe. I am very committed to values that are considered progressive, like second chances and ending mandatory minimums and giving courts the discretion to give people second chances that haven't traditionally been accounted for in the law. But that does not mean that by any stretch of the imagination, I am not committed to going against violent crime. I am very serious about addressing violent crime appropriately and making sure that we utilize our resources to address violent crime, because again, I take very seriously our community safety. As you indicated, I am raising my own family here. And so it's very personal to me, being someone who is from this community and also raising my family here, that we have a safe community, and that when something does happen that is beyond our control and we have a violent incident, that there is accountability, and that we, do everything in our power to take that very seriously when it reaches the courthouse.
And it's an important distinction to note that just because you're progressive doesn't mean you subtract accountability from the law system itself. So good to hear that accountability is still a key feature here.
Yes.
And I'm guessing that the concept of a progressive CA is kind of a rethinking of the position in the system, kind of being worried about more than just a law being broken, but the community at large. Does the law actually hurt the community? Thoughts like that. So your input on helping the community too has a record, and I could probably mention a good first example of that record, the Future Leaders Initiatives. So to the viewer who may not know about you, what is the point of that, and what has it accomplished to this point?
So the Future Leaders Initiative is one of the programs I talked about earlier that I established in 2015. And that was established in order to support our young people, to help get them involved in the law and make sure that they are supported when pursuing careers in the law. But it really developed, and we've had hundreds of young people over the past 10 years. Some of them are interested in careers in the law. Some of them have not been. They've just wanted the opportunity to learn more about the court system and about the Commonwealth Attorney's Office. And we have multiple graduates of the Future Leaders Initiative who are now practicing and licensed attorneys. So it has been a labor of love to make sure that we have young people who get to spend time with our attorneys. And every time they come to the office, they spend time with me. So they get to see themselves as the future leaders of our criminal justice system. They get to visit the courthouse. They get to sit in the bench where they can envision themselves as future judges. But really, the point of that program is not to treat our young people like, they're in a scared straight program, but to get them to see themselves as the future leaders of our criminal justice system, like my mother did for me when I was a young girl. She brought me to the courthouse. I was able to envision myself as a lawyer, and I want the future leaders of our system to have that opportunity as well.
And then I've also heard of Control-Alt-Delete. What was the inspiration for Control-Alt-Delete? What has it done for Portsmouth?
So Control-Alt-Delete is a completely different program from Future Leaders Initiative. Control-Alt-Delete is designed to support the members of our community who are either formerly incarcerated, who were convicted of crimes, or who had some dealing with the criminal legal system that left them in a position where, if not supported, they could have issues with recidivism, which means that they could go back to incarceration or have trouble with the system again. The purpose is to get their voting rights restored, their civil rights restored, and to help with job preparedness, and to keep them again on the right track, and to let them know that they are supported. And we have had many people who have come through that Control-Alt-Delete program, whether in the community. I've done that program through seminars in the community and also in state prisons. So we've had people who have come out of incarceration, and we've seen them develop their own programming. We've seen them giving back, and also just becoming productive members of our community, because many people don't think about the fact that incarceration is not designed in all instances to be permanent. A lot of people come out, and we want them to be able to contribute to our communities and to our society and not to be subject to recidivism going back to prison. So that is the purpose of the Control Alt Delete program. And I think it sends the message. If the prosecutor is supporting people who have come out of incarceration, who served their time, and they've held themselves or have been held accountable, there's no reason why no one else in the community shouldn't support them in their reentry.
I follow that. I follow. Now, when looking for topics to discuss for this show, I looked up online, like Wavy Newston does focuses on the candidates. You were one of them. So some of my next questions are based from that. What do you say to Portsmouth residents who are concerned about murder cases not ending with conviction?
So one of the things that I have done frequently, and I've done an extensive interview with the news station on this very topic, is that I want to educate the community on what it takes to actually get a conviction, not just on a murder case, but any case. When we are talking about the prosecution of cases, there are elements to crimes that have to be met. So anytime we have a murder case or a homicide in our city, first, the person who is the perpetrator has to be identified. We don't ever want to be prosecuting the wrong person. So number one, it has to be an identification. That is one element. And sometimes we have to ensure that we have witnesses who feel safe. And this is where system trust comes in, where they feel safe enough to come forward and actually testify and participate with the process. Where we have issues with cases is if we do not have sufficient evidence. That means physical evidence or evidence in the form of witness testimony. However you look at it, the elements of any offense have to be met, and we have to have sufficient evidence in order to do so. So when there is concern about the prosecution of any case, it boils down to where the evidence is and whether or not the elements are met of any crime. And so I have talked frequently about witness protection related concerns to make sure that we have witnesses who not only feel safe, but are safe. It is a very real thing when witnesses feel unsafe because they have to live in community oftentimes with people who have committed crimes, and it's a real thing, their safety considerations. So our office has worked with members of the community who are witnesses to make sure that they feel safe and are safe. But every time there is a concern for us, that concern boils down to the sufficiency of the evidence, ensuring that we have the appropriate evidence. And then ultimately, we want people to serve on juries. We talk about exercising our right to vote, and that's very important. But when you register to vote, you also become someone who could be called in for jury duty. Mm-hmm. And we have a lot of people who do not want to take on that responsibility. They either don't feel like it or they have responsibilities. Some people don't feel like it, but there are some people who cannot take on that responsibility because they have a job that they may be afraid of losing, or they may not be able to afford jury duty. But we need to make sure that any opportunity we have, if you are able to serve on juries, that you do so, because the fact finder on cases that come before our community oftentimes are members of our community who are registered voters. So serve on those juries, because if there are decisions that are coming down that you don't agree with that came from the jury, if you serve as a juror, you can participate with the process and make sure that you are considering the evidence and making that determination. So when we have cases that are either heard by judges or juries, it comes down to the evidence. Our team works very hard and is in court every single day, putting evidence before fact finders. And if members of the community are concerned, I would recommend that they participate with that process as fact finders and jurors themselves. But for us, we are working very hard to make sure that we're considering the evidence, and before we bring cases before the court, that all of the elements are met.
I do understand the importance of that. I, like many, have watched many a Law and Order, and one of the great shows and movies out there that makes me like the idea, at least, of being in a jury. I will admit, I'm 38. I've never been given the paperwork to be summoned to do jury. I've had the surveys, but I haven't done the jury duty just yet. I want to shout out the first and so far only comment of the night from Skull, that they love this. People deserve second chances. So it's good to be mindful of the possibility of serving people who could fairly be given second chances in this society. So I think it's important for me, because I also consider myself to be progressive, that giving people second chances for some of the more softer crimes could definitely be a good thing for the community. But again, that is my own version of the soapbox right there. I want to go up to another interesting question I got from wavy.com to the CA candidates. And it was about the topic of plea agreements. One opponent of yours said that they want to plea out gun-related offenses or other violent acts. What's the deal? What's the discrepancy here?
So again, everyone has to, who wants to run for public office, they have to share their own values and what they will and will not do. I will not say that there is a whole subset of offenses that I would refuse to enter into a plea agreement with. And I will tell you why. When we talk about plea agreements, it is exactly that. It is an agreement between the Commonwealth with the consultation of victims and witnesses. That is what should happen. And also the accused. And as the Commonwealth's attorney, as an elected prosecutor, I answer to everyone. That means I care about the victims, I care about the witnesses, I care about the accused, and I care about the community at large. And so if I have a case where there is a violent crime or there's a gun, and there is a witness or a victim who is involved, and they have reasons why they want our office to enter into a plea agreement, and the accused wants to take responsibility, and there is an appropriate outcome where there is accountability and it keeps our community safe, there's no reason why I would not enter into a plea agreement under those circumstances. And so everything has to be considered on a case-by-case basis. When we start talking about doing one thing all of the time, that's where I feel like we lose our opportunity to really impact justice in an equitable way. And so that is the difference between, talking about blanket responses and equality versus equity. And so I don't believe in having a blanket response to everything all the time. I believe in doing what is right all the time under every circumstance. And sometimes that can be taxing. That takes a lot of work, but I have very good attorneys in my office. And I'm very proud that the makeup of my office is very professionally diverse. Mm-hmm. I have members of my office who were career public defenders before they came over to the Commonwealth Attorney's Office. And so they spent a lot of time working with people who were charged with crimes, and they understand the importance as well of getting it right every single time and not looking at cases as just files, but understanding that we have people attached to every single one of these cases. And it requires us to put an eye on every single case and try to get it right every single time and not just say, oh, we'll always do this or we'll never do that. But what we will always do is we will always try to get it right, and we will always try to be fair and consider the needs of our victims and witnesses in our community, and also consider what accountability looks like in ensuring that it is fair.
Now, Wavy News 10, based in Portsmouth, also asked about cases and how they're being chosen to prosecute. So here is where a progressive CA might win out when it comes to principle. Where does the additional discretion create possible virtue in the community?
So I think the origination of cases is an important thing to talk about in the Commonwealth of Virginia, because when you go around the country, and I've done a lot of work as it relates to justice at the national level to learn and to really improve the administration of justice here in Portsmouth, Virginia. When you look around the nation, the way cases originate is very different here in Virginia. A lot of other states have prosecutor intake units in the prosecutor's offices, but in Virginia, we have a magistrate system that allows law enforcement and members of the community to go to this magistrate that's open 24 hours, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, and take out criminal charges. So by the time our office is involved, charges have been taken out many times by way of warrant through the magistrate system, whether by law enforcement or by members of the community. And then at that point, we work with our witnesses, our victims, and the court system to determine how those cases should be handled. So a lot of cases that have originated, by the time they get to our office, they have already taken off. We don't have a prosecutor intake unit in the way other prosecutors' offices do around the country. So it's important to note that. And we do have some cases that are presented to us with full investigation If you think of like a officer involved shooting case, those are typically investigated all the way through and then brought to the office, and we make a determination about whether or not that will proceed to the grand jury for a direct indictment. But the majority of our cases come out of that magistrate system, and the cases have already originated and are matriculating through the court system by the time we get them. So that is how they originate. And so when you're talking about exercising prosecutorial discretion, we are, looking at whether or not something is appropriate or whether we need to proceed in the way it traditionally goes. A lot of the cases that I did not think were appropriate for prosecution are not happening because the law has changed. So a good example is marijuana. That was one of the first things I announced in 2018, that I was not going to prosecute marijuana related cases. But now we see changes in the law, and legislative reform has made it such that those cases are not making their way through the system anymore. And so it's really, again, just like I talked about not too long ago, we look at everything on a case by case basis. If something is not appropriate because the elements are not met, then we make it our business to ensure that we are notifying all involved parties that the elements are not met and it's not appropriate for us to proceed forward. But again, many of the cases, the law has changed. So some of those cases that I did not think were appropriate, they are no longer coming through our system. But I think it was important to have that little education moment so that people understand that we don't have the opportunity that many other prosecutor offices have to make those decisions at the outset. Those cases are already moving forward through the system by the time we get them.
And while I like to be a fair host, I'm not necessarily an unbiased host because I admit my own progressive mentality, which wasn't always true. When I started getting into politics, I was more conservative, then became a libertarian. Now I'm way over where I'm at. And I started noticing the local level in comparative CAs. And I think it was Norfolk CA who also was joining in the idea that they were not going to prosecute marijuana offenses as well. But this is not something that I was able to see from the city that I hail from, which is Virginia Beach. It's a different community over there, if you would say that. But to get off of that bias and go a little bit toward my own personal bias and just reflection on some of my time here now in Portsmouth, because and there's that crash I was concerned about. I saw.
I have a cat too, so I'm surprised she hasn't walked behind me yet. So we'll
she's
see.
okay, but I swear she just did a somersault. But lastly, I moved to Portsmouth in 2022, and in January of 2024, a mass shooting occurred on that street right there. 2 died, including a teenager, and was right here when it happened. I literally heard it. It doesn't do much. And again, this is for me. It doesn't do much for me just to rely on the promises of a myriad of CA candidates that they're going to be tough on crime, because again, to me, that's all after the crime. Gun violence to me isn't just solved by tough on crime CAs. Is that something I should continue to be mindful of in that concept? Are there ideas that CAs could still provide for the community that might help besides just saying, I'm going to be tough on crime?
So I wholeheartedly think that you're onto something when you talk about having other measures than just the platitudes. Saying that you're tough on crime, you said it perfectly. By the time a prosecutor's office is involved, it is reactive. Something has already happened in our community. And so one of the things that I have talked about frequently, and I'm working with certain resources that I have now to put more in place, is a robust violence interruption program. Again, I've done research around the country. One of the areas that has seen some successful violence interruption is Northern California. So Richmond, California, in Oakland, California, Live for USA is a program that I think is a really good example. They have some involvement with the Golden State Warriors up in that Bay Area, and some of the people who are involved with that organization, where they have seen violence interruption programming reduce violent crime up to 60% at certain times. And that is where we see not just, people saying, I'm a violence interrupter and, I'm going to go to the scene of a crime, but instead involving system actors, involving hospitals, involving employers, and having resources that are utilized to get people who are involved with violent crime out of that life, by rerouting them to jobs, by having them sit down with credible messengers and people who they respect, who used to be involved in violent crime, who are pulling them out of those lifestyles. And so prosecutors don't traditionally speak on these things, from what I can tell. Some do. But I have seen the change in certain communities and the real results and the statistics about what happens when you have a robust violence interruption program. So as a prosecutor, I would like to be involved with something like that in our city. Again, changing the landscape of victim witness, and not just having the victim witness programs traditionally, but moving and having witness protection added on and having robust witness protection programming, like you see at the federal level, so that, again, even though we're dealing with something reactive, once something does happen, we know that members of the community understand that they will be protected, and that they won't be left to be witnesses and to participate with this process alone. And then sustainable programming, like the programs I have, keeping those in place, making sure that, again, we have these options for our young people, to keep them on the right track. This past year, we had field trips with all 3 of our high schools. So not just having, those who can get the transportation in the summer to come to our office and participate, but having people in our school system who are around, members of our community who, they may be subject to people who are involved with violent crime, giving them the opportunity to come on field trips and come to the courthouse and be involved with the positive side, giving them those opportunities to see themselves as the future of a successful career. And our Control Alt Delete program, reducing recidivism. When I came into office, our recidivism rate, which is people going back into incarceration, it was in the 20s. Now it's in the teens. I think programs like Control Alt Delete have something to do with that, keeping people on the right track. So again, taking this holistic approach to prosecution that's bigger than the platitude, saying I'm going to be tough on crime and that will change everything. That sounds good, but that doesn't do it. We have to do more than just say things that sound good or have sounded good for years. But where is the action? What are we going to do to be a part of the solution, not just in a reactive way, but in a proactive way, and imagining, thinking big, thinking beyond what we have seen. And again, I look to the national landscape. I look and see where our community is getting it right and what can we bring here to our Portsmouth community for us to get it right as well.
I like the idea of looking broadly to see the best possible ideas, bring them right back here, because might as well at least try to bring better ideas as soon as you learn more new ones and already have the original ones that you've thought of yourself. So glad to hear all this too. And of course, I welcome so many more individuals in the community to keep studying about all these candidates. And of course, Lacey Gilmore with the second comment of the night regarding a cat emoji. And he's now sleeping right there on the coffee table. So why did you do the jump in the first place? That's what I want to know. I know you're experienced being in the community. It's almost daily, if not literally daily. So I know that you also know your way around canvassing. So if you were canvassing, say, this neighborhood, happened upon my house, and I knew nothing about this particular race, what would be your pitch to get me out to vote in the first place and to vote for you?
So it's really hard to do the 30-second version after the robust conversation that we've just had. But I think what I will focus on is I would want you to know that I have been serving this community for the past 10 years proudly as a daughter of Portsmouth, who cares a great deal about getting justice right. Not doing the easy thing, but doing the hard thing. And that means every single day, I and my team are committed to going in the courthouse and making sure that we are committed to our values of being fair and equitable in every single case. That means that we are looking to ensure that people are held accountable for violent crime. We are committed to safety, but we are also committed to fairness and justice for those who need behavioral health care services, who may need a drug court treatment program, and who may need an opportunity to have a second chance so that they can contribute to our community. So I would say to you, it is important that you exercise your right to vote and that you express your will for the future of our city. And I would ask for your vote. I would make sure that you knew that early voting starts on September 19th and runs through November 1st, and that our election day is on November 4th. And I would ask you if you knew where your polling location was, and if you didn't, I would help you find out that information.
Excellent stuff. I have enjoyed this conversation. You're right. It is robust, and I want more Portsmouth residents to hear it. So, of course, Portsmouth residents, like, comment, subscribe to SchezzWho so you can learn more about why, when you go to the polls starting on September 19th, you know who exactly you want to vote for Commonwealth Attorney here in Portsmouth. And I wholeheartedly want to thank the Portsmouth Commonwealth Attorney, Stephanie Morales, the Honorable, for joining SchezzWho tonight. I wish you great luck and hope to continue seeing great things from you in the future.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. I appreciate this conversation.
Thank you so much as well. Take care. See you next time. This has been another great SchezzWho, one of my favorites, right here for Portsmouth. Get to learn some great stuff about the Commonwealth Attorney position, the current Commonwealth Attorney, goals in mind, and a little bit about just the community and what makes it better. So I'm glad you guys were able to tune in. I'm glad I got some commentary tonight. Again, I want you to share this with your neighbors in Portsmouth because they need to know as well. And of course, they need to know about SchezzWho, your top spot for politics. So make sure that you subscribe to SchezzWho. I'll catch you next time on this great political channel.